Hello everyone, welcome back to a different type of video on the Carlton Rap channel, a non-Carlton video for once. And today I am going through my AFL season predictions, I guess the back end of the season, tipping a couple of games with this ladder predictor that probably quite a few people have used. I thought it would be cool to just go through, see what my tips lead to come the end of the season, and see if my opinion is a bit different to others, similar to others. But let's get straight into it. Bulldogs St Kilda. Just think Bulldogs are too mentally hurt now to get over the line against teams above them, really. This will be quite an even game, especially that St Kilda haven't really hit good form. They beat the Blues 2 weeks ago, but then they backed it up, losing to the Dockers by 40 points, so it doesn't suggest they've been on a real high level of form as of recent. But I will go the Saints by 17 points in quite a close game. Giants, Brisbane, another, two teams completely on different ends of the spectrum. I guess Giants have sort of accepted their season hasn't gone to plan at all, and I think since that 2019 grand final it's been downhill for them, really. Brisbane need to bounce back against Brisbane, and I think, with a lot of COVID issues, they haven't been full strength, and I don't think their best will win a premiership. I just think they have proven they're good, but I don't think they're going to accept they'll be great. But obviously Brisbane will get the job done. In this one I say by 30 points. Adelaide Collingwood. It's always a tough game in Adelaide. Whoever Adelaide play, they tend to always put in a good fight. And Collingwood will probably be a very good game to watch. And I think purely what we've seen with Collingwood is that they aren't really as good as what the ladder suggests they are. I think that North Melbourne game proved that very well, and I think they're getting away with a lot of criticism purely because they came back and won. But I do think they will get a reality check very soon, and it will probably come at the time they don't want it, which is around the finals time. But I do think they are a better team than Adelaide, so I will give them the win on this one. I say in a close one purely because of the Adelaide factor. If this was in Melbourne, I would probably put Collingwood by about 5 or 6 goals, but Collingwood by 10 in Adelaide. We'll move past this game, no need to talk about that. Carlton Geelong, probably equal game of the round with Freo and Sydney. Really hard to pick because Geelong they're really hitting their peak right now. The Blues, I wouldn't say hitting their peak. They did what they needed to against West Coast. They sort of tend to play not even bad when they're playing at the worst. Their worst sometimes can match other teams' best, which I think we saw with the Saints game. But I think Geelong is a really tough one because if you get a couple things wrong, you can put yourself out of the game really quickly. MCG does suit the Blues, but I think Geelong mentally will have it over us. They have for the last 10 years, so I think I'll put Geelong in a close one. Freo and Sydney, two teams. I guess Freo want to solidify a top 4 spot. Sydney don't want to drop into that 8th and 9th sort of discussion. They want to keep well inside the 8. Freo, really hard to beat in Perth. I was going to go for Freo here. I just think their best is quite a lot better than Sydney's best. But it will be a good game to watch if you're a neutral fan. Hawthorn, West Coast, two teams that have sort of, not given up on this year, but it's clearly all about development for these two teams. West Coast, I was quite concerned how much they gave up in the last game against the Blues, and it reminded me of a Carlton side from 2018 that just completely fell over as soon as the pressure got to them. Hawthorn, good win against Adelaide, and they beat them quite well, which is important for a team that's developing. And some of those players do have premiership experience, winning experience, but some don't. And I think those type of games are important. You put away, and you start building a good list and a good environment again to replicate something from what they got, a couple of years ago in that 3-peat. West Coast did travel well to the G against Richmond, but I just think Hawthorn will be on too much of a high from last week and they'll get it done by 22. Melbourne and Port Adelaide. Interesting considering how much Port Adelaide seem to dominate a couple teams and they don't do much against others. Melbourne, I'm I think a lot of people aren't convinced, not worried, but they're not convinced either. In Alice Springs as well, so environment is a lot different and probably doesn't suit either team, I don't think, with the real hot weather. Maybe Port a little more, but both Melbourne and Adelaide have hot summer times, but obviously both have cold winters. So I'm gonna go in to say Melbourne by 3 goals for this one. Essendon Gold Coast, you could probably put this down as one of the games of the round as well. I think Essendon have taken 2 big scalps, Sydney and Brisbane. I guess the Brisbane game wasn't as big as a scalp as Sydney, considering Sydney were more closer to a full strength team. And the Gold Coast, after the siren against Richmond, they've been ultra impressive, and they remind me, not really remind me, but they give me the sense that this is the year before they make finals. I don't think it's not because they're finals ready. I don't see it as a bad thing for them to miss out as long as they're really pushing. I don't think you can go backwards again like they did in 2014. I'm confident they'll push, but I just think they have lost too many games where they really have to be perfect from here. Gold Coast. In Melbourne, I'm actually going to say Essendon for this one. They like Marvel Sunday afternoons. It's a tough one, but I just think Essendon will bury him, weirdly enough. I just think Gold Coast will be on too much of a high, and as soon as they get down, they tend to struggle, especially away from home. So I'm going to say Essendon for this one. Richmond Freo, so we're into round 19. I'll go through these ones quicker now. I'm going to say Richmond. I know Freo just travelled well to Melbourne, but the Carlton game the week before, they did struggle against a much larger Vic club. They never really gained any momentum. The crowd couldn't get them into it. They did struggle, and I think Richmond, there's a lot on the line for them, you'd think, on this game, so I'm going to put Richmond by a couple goals. North Melbourne Hawthorn for that. Sydney and Adelaide. Sydney just too good at the SCG usually, and Adelaide I think are definitely at the point of their season where it's just about playing out their youngsters and just getting through unscathed, I guess, and moving forward. Sydney by 26. Port Adelaide Geelong, an interesting one in Adelaide. I think this game will be very dependent on the Carlton Geelong result, being that if Geelong win, I think they'll go in thinking this is an easy win, in which case I would say Port. And I do think Geelong will win, so I'm going to say Port in a really close one by 7 points. Brisbane Gold Coast, probably another interesting one, especially if Brisbane don't have a full team. Gold Coast, if it's I think if this was at Metricon, I'd back them, but at the Gabba, I just think the Lions will be too strong for the Suns. The Bulldogs and the Demons, a good one for neutrals, I think, but the Dogs, yeah, they would not have given themselves a chance going into this. Melbourne by 18. Carlton Giants, I would say the Blues quite comfortably. If we're going off the Giants' recent form, this is one they can't lose in terms of top 4 aspirations, and even top 8. It's one they really need to win without a doubt. Collingwood and Essendon could go either way, and if we go back to Anzac Day, Collingwood were definitely the much better team, but they never really seemed to put Essendon away until the last 5 minutes. So I would say Collingwood again, but I wouldn't be surprised if Essendon snatched it from them, just considering we go off last time. And my theory is that teams don't tend to lose to the same team twice in a year. It's usually 1-1, and we saw that with St Kilda Freo, Carlton Freo, Richmond Carlton. The teams seem to fix what they made mistakes on from the first game, and I think Essendon could do that, but I think Collingwood will be too strong, especially what would be on the line for them. West Coast St Kilda, I think St Kilda will travel well like they did in round 2, get that done easy. Round 20, Freo and Melbourne. I mean, this is a huge game, probably for top 2, I'd assume, and you'd probably like to say that the winner of this would be guaranteed a top 2 side, and this, doing previous ladder predictions in the past, usually always comes down to these 2 teams who get second and third. But Freo did it the first time, and I definitely see them doing the second time. with the Perth crowd, so I'm going to put Freo by 18. Collingwood and Port. This game will be interesting in the media with the whole prison bar saga, but tough game to call, because if Port are still in the race for finals, this can go either way. If Collingwood are in the same position, it would be a really tough game. And look, I think this one will get me a lot of criticism, but I think Port will travel and get the 4 points against the Pies. Sydney and GWS, the Battle of the Bridge, as it's referred to. Sydney for this one, like I said, the SCG, I don't think they've lost there this year yet, so I don't see that ending anytime soon. Saints Hawthorn. St Kilda simply have too much on the line to lose this game. I'd say St Kilda by 18. Geelong and Bulldogs, not going to talk about this. If it's in Geelong, it's a Geelong win 9 out of 10 times, and this will certainly be the case. Adelaide Carlton, another one Carlton that should be a non-negotiable. However, in Adelaide can go either way. I'm going to say Carlton a really close one, 3 points. Gold Coast West Coast. Gold Coast, they don't lose in Metricon very often. Apart from that Collingwood game, they really have held their, they've really kept going every time they're in the Gold Coast, and not many teams seem to come over and give them a real challenge. So Gold Coast in an easy one. Richmond, Brisbane. I think Brisbane are the better team. However, they do not travel to the MCG well at all, and I think it's been 8 years. I don't see that ending anytime soon. That Melbourne game certainly proved how much of a weakness that team has on the MCG. Richmond comfortably as well. If this was at the Gabba, Brisbane, but yeah, Brisbane just don't travel well at all. Essendon North, Essendon quite easily. Melbourne and Collingwood. This is where Collingwood's season starts to get a bit harder. They beat them the first time, but I don't think that was a full strength Melbourne team in terms of just usual potential and not in terms of players. They did have a couple players out, but I don't think that should make the difference for a team like Melbourne. But I don't think they will lose to Collingwood twice. Melbourne by 19. Hawthorn Gold Coast in Tassie. This is one that could go either way. Hawthorn seemed to really turn up in Tassie most of the time, and we saw that against Sydney, but they fell away. And like I said, Gold Coast don't travel well, especially it's a colder climate. I'm actually going to back the Hawks for this one, 13 points. GWS and Essendon. I think Essendon will want some late wins on the board. I'm going to go with Essendon for this one. Dogs and Freo. I mean, if Freo can make this a tough game for themselves, that being because it's in Melbourne, but I don't think they would let a game slip to the Dogs, unless the Dogs are in good form leading up to it. Geelong Saints, like I said, game in Geelong is just given to Geelong. You can give it to Geelong every time. Port and Richmond. This is always a really good matchup to watch in Adelaide. These two teams always give us a contest. Interesting one to choose. I'm going to say Richmond, but like I said, if Port are in the situation where they can make the top 8, they will win those type of games, but I just think Richmond are too strong overall. Not going to go through this. Brisbane Carlton, an interesting one. I'm a firm believer that we're going to win this in Brisbane, and only reason I say that is after the Essendon game has given me a lot more confidence that teams shouldn't be worried to go to the Gabba. However, I can see Brisbane needing a top 2 spot, Carlton wanting a top 4 spot. Hard to call. I'm going to go the Lions by under a goal. However, if the Blues get up, it wouldn't surprise me a lot. West Coast Adelaide, probably a game no one wants to watch. I'm going to back West Coast. I think they're going to get a second win eventually, and I think this is the game they'll do it. St Kilda Brisbane, another really interesting game. This will definitely be a game where St Kilda probably have their season on the line, I'd assume. I think it will come down to this type of game. I don't think it will be down to the last round for St Kilda. I'm going to say the Lions, and purely because St Kilda tend to not live up to the occasion when it comes to these big games, and we saw that against Freo. And I guess you could say Carlton as well, but I just think Carlton's worst was still going to run over St Kilda's best. So I'm going to say Brisbane by 15. Bulldogs and Giants. Bulldogs for this one. Oh, another good, I guess you could say, rivalry that's appeared in the last couple of years. Adelaide and North. Adelaide comfortably, especially in Adelaide. Gold Coast and Geelong. A tough one because, like I said, Gold Coast play really well in that climate. They train at night to, accommodate for that type of footy at that twilight time. So, tough one to call. I just think Geelong have always outplayed Gold Coast no matter where it is. So I'm going to back Geelong. Melbourne Carlton, probably going to be a great game to watch when it comes to it. Melbourne at their full strength. Look, it's hard because Carlton actually match up very well. If Carlton are able to beat Brisbane the week before, I think you could probably pencil this in as a win. But I think you're easier, and it's probably easier to back Melbourne, in all honesty, and it's a safer option in a close one by 7 points. Freo West Coast. Freo will do this quite easy. In the West, Richmond and Hawthorn. I'm going to say Richmond by 20 points. Sydney Collingwood. This will be probably one where Sydney want either team. I think the winner of this game will solidify a top 8 spot. Just mathematically, I think this will be that type of game. Probably for a 7th spot. I reckon the loser of this will sort of be playing for 8th the next week, but the winner will be solidifying their spot. But SCG is too much for the Pies. Essendon Port, probably another interesting game. I think Essendon and Carlton have the best Marvel crowds and the most intimidating Marvel crowds. So I don't think any team, it's a given win. So I'm going to actually... I do think I'm going to back Essendon in this one. I just don't see Port coming to Marvel and beating Essendon at least convincingly. It could be a close win. Brisbane, Melbourne at the Gabba. Really another great game, and to end the season off, probably for a 1st, 2nd or 3rd spot. I'd assume this will be for a home qualifying, not so much 1st spot. I think Geelong are too good to not get that 1st spot at this point in time. Obviously things can change. Gonna say, it really is tough. I'm gonna say Melbourne again by 18. They really did it way too easy the first time. Carlton, Collingwood. I'm never confident against Collingwood. They always have it over us mentally. They've just been able to get the job done. I think if Collingwood are playing for a top 8 spot, they will win this quite comfortably. And by the way, I haven't seen the ladder below me that is updating, so these decisions aren't based off the ladder, etc. It's based off just generally what I think. But I think if Carlton want a top 4 spot, they will rise to the occasion with a home crowd. And we didn't lose to Collingwood twice last year, which I thought we would, but we did it, and I think we won't again. I'm going to say Carlton by 13. Essendon and Richmond. I think Richmond will probably need to get into finals. They probably will have a spot by this point, but I think they're still too strong for Essendon. Geelong and West Coast. Geelong quite comfortably. Freo against the Giants. I'll get through this quickly. Bulldogs against the Hawks. Gold Coast against the Roos. This is a tough one. I think I don't want to look at the ladder. I want to make a general assumption, and I think St Kilda won't lose to Sydney twice, like my general theory. I'm going to say close one by 7. Port against Adelaide, and there's our ladder. There is our final ladder. Collingwood in 9th, St Kilda in 8th. That's very interesting because I think, in hindsight, if that Collingwood game that last game is a win, it could be a completely different scenario. I don't know if we can go back. We can. And if we go to Carlton Collingwood. If the Pies are to win, that boots the Saints out. Very interesting scenario there. Very interesting. I don't know, and I'm obviously going to put it back to my original tip. I think Collingwood fans will be quite annoyed with that, and fair enough, because they have done enough to make finals. You'd think 7 in a row. I think it comes down to these last couple games for them. Those last 3 games will be really pivotal in deciding the top 8. But there we go. There is my top 8 and the rest of the ladder. Can't see North winning another game. I originally said Essendon would be their second win, but I think Essendon have improved a bit since then and shown they can win more games than what they've seemed capable of. West Coast, look, they just probably want to move on quickly from this season, but I don't see it getting better for them anytime soon. Giants, Adelaide, Hawthorn, Essendon sort of round up that bottom half. I think that Sydney loss really will hurt the Dogs, and I don't think they'll do well for the rest of the season. Suns, if they can get to 50% or just under, that is definitely a pass mark. I do see them only getting better and not worse. Port, I think, will sort of have hope they can get into the top 8, and I think that will spark them to, get up to 10th or 9th. Like I said, Collingwood or St Kilda can go either way. Especially if Sydney win that last game, they're out, and it does come down to that. It's just I'm going off my theory that teams don't tend to lose twice at the same team in the same year. But just to make it clear, I do think Collingwood can be in the top 8. This is just without looking at the ladder, and could be worse. I could have been that type that saw Collingwood in 8th in that last game and said, oh, nah, Carlton will win and knock him out. I just think Blues won't lose twice. But let's get on to finals. Geelong Richmond in a qualifying. Interesting. They played a really close game a couple of weeks ago. I think Geelong probably have the talent to beat Richmond. However, I just think a final at the MCG, they've had it over the Cats twice in the last 5 years. 3 years if you include that grand final. I would say Richmond. Brisbane and Saints, I think Brisbane do this quite comfortably. Sydney and Carlton, really interesting one, because Sydney don't lose at the SCG. Carlton first final. I think Sydney would have to do quite a lot run to lose this one. But I think it would be great to see the Blues in a final. Melbourne and Freo at the MCG. Just think at the MCG it's too much for Melbourne. For Freo. Geelong Brisbane MCG game, it's Geelong all the way. And Freo Sydney in Perth. Gonna say Freo. 2 interesting prelim finals. It's hard to really. It's hard to see it happening like this, and it's probably because I don't. Richmond haven't really proven they're a top 4 side. However, I just think their best is still quite good compared to the rest of the competition, and with their their draw coming up, I just don't see them losing that many games. A Richmond home prelim, look, it's hard. I don't even see Richmond making the granny, but if we're going off this, it's just hard to not see Richmond winning a home prelim. So I'm going to say Richmond, interestingly enough. And then Melbourne Geelong, I'm going to have to back Melbourne at the MCG, which leads to a Richmond-Melbourne grand final. And I'm quite surprised myself. I didn't really see this happening. It does come down to percentage. And look, if we go Geelong on this one, we change this up a bit, I think it would be a Freo-Melbourne grand final. So, could go either way. I do think Melbourne will win it either way, whether it's a Freo or Richmond or a Geelong opponent. I think their best is going to beat anyone in the competition. So, maybe a very boring prediction in the end. But I think a bit interesting in terms of where teams ended up. I don't think a lot of people would have had Richmond that high, had Carlton that low in a sense. I think people would expect Carlton to finish around that 5th and even push for 4th. and I think that Brisbane game sort of does dictate where they finish. Could be a bit of a different result. But otherwise, hope you guys have enjoyed. Let me know what your thoughts are for the rest of the season, who's finishing top 8, who is not. Until then, I'll see you in another video.